Next, I want to talk about growing up. I grew up, of course, in this Chennai, my grandmother's house, and my grandmother had like nine children, two boys and seven girls, and they were all scattered around the state of Tamil Nadu, from Coimbatore to Madurai and other places. And there was a period during schooling where all my aunts and uncles would send their children to stay with my grandmother's house for their schooling education for whatever reason, they were getting transferred or I don't know why. But all I remember was I grew up with a lot of cousins, a lot of cousins. We were at least 10 to 15 cousins at any one time. My mother's younger brother was a college professor at that time, English professor at Loyola College, where later on I did my PUC. And he had about 4 or 5 children. So those 4 or 5 children and I were a permanent residents of the household, along with other cousins who would come stay for a couple of years, 3 4 years, and then go back to their homes and things like that. So that's what I remember. My grandmother had one buffalo, had one coconut tree, and a lot of chicken in the house. And the chicken used to roam around the whole lot. It was, I don't know, maybe a half an acre land or something. And there used to be one shed where dried hay would be kept for the buffalo to be fed with that hay. So part of our duties as grandchildren was, sometimes our grandmom will tell whoever is there around, go bring some hay for the buffalo. Buffalo had a name, I don't remember. So, in fact, she used to take the milk from the buffalo every day. There used to be a milkman who came. His name was Damodaran, Palkar, milkman, who used to come every day, morning and evening, and milk the buffalo. And after taking enough for our house coffee needs and maybe milk needs, the rest of the milk would be sold to the neighboring houses. So in fact, my grandmom's nickname was Palkarama, means the milk lady. That's how she was known in the neighborhood. And as kids, for us, the duties was once a week we had to bathe the buffalo. So we had to take the little bit of hay in our hands, pour the water over it. It was a tide, of course, always. And we had to rub it, and we used to enjoy that. It was like playing in a sprinkler in the garden now for kids. So that was one of the chores. The other thing is, all these chicken, for some reason, they would go into that haystack shed and they would lay their eggs there. And having breakfast, those days, the most common breakfast was idlis. Idli, it's made of rice and lentil ground together and steamed. And for the side, they used to make something like a chutney or a sambar. And once in a while, my grandma would say, okay, I'll make eggs for all of you. Go bring your own eggs. So we will all run to that shed, and there would be a lot of eggs laid there by the chicken. So we would bring those one egg each, and give it to my grandmom, and she would make it and give us all whatever we wanted, sunny side up or scrambled. We all had to sit in the kitchen room. The kitchen was about maybe 12 feet by 12 feet. And so there were no tables or chairs. We had to sit along the wall on two walls with our plates. And some of my younger aunts were there, and they used to come and serve. Like sometimes my mom, other aunts. So that was one of my early memories of eating there. And the most common fish, we were on the Chennai seashore, was mackerel fish, because that was cheap. Mackerel. We used to get 4 mackerels for 1 rupee. 1 rupee is like 1.5 cents today, and we used to get 4 mackerels. And of course, we wouldn't get 1 mackerel each. That was too much for us to afford. So a mackerel was cut into 2 halves, the head side or the tail side. So they would come with a bowl of curry or fried fish to each of us sitting around. They'll say, you want the head or you want the tail? So all the boys would ask for the tail part, so they don't have to mess with eating the head part. And for some reason, I never understood why the girls always liked the head part. And of course, later on, I started liking the head part when I grew up. But as young boys, we used to take the tail part of the fish. One of the things I remember was about the coconut tree. It was a very narrow lot, the lot was only like maybe 100 feet, and the next house was there, and this coconut tree was the same place as where the buffalo was tied, and the tree grew right there on the border, on the wall, and it started dropping sometimes coconuts and the dried leaves. So the next door people complained that they have small children and this could be a fatal accident if the coconut tree was actually slanting towards into their plot. So finally my grandma had to accept and cut off that coconut tree. I was there when it was cut off. And that was a big loss for my grandma because coconuts were used for cooking every day in Chennai. I guess after that she had to buy it. The other thing I remember growing up was my confusion in my name. My father's name is Swami, and I was named Ignatius. In the part of India we come from in the south, in the state of Tamil Nadu, there was no concept of last name. There was surname and given name. It was kind of the British. But the British used the same surname for the whole lineage, I guess. The patriarchal lineage, father, grandfather, like that. And in India, I don't know why surname in my particular town was interpreted as sir. Sir means your father, surname. So I was called, my name was Ignatius and my last name became Swami. And I remember in my school it was funny. They used to keep mixing and it was Swami Ignatius one year, the next year it was Ignatius Swami. So when calling the roll call, if one teacher called me Swami one year, the next year for some reason that teacher would call me Ignatius. So in school I was always known as Ignatius, but Ignatius being a kind of a long phonetic name, I was always called Iggy in school. And at home, I was the only son from my mother, and there was a pet name. Most of the people have a pet name, and I was called Kanna. Kanna means darling, dear, like that. It's a Tamil word for Kanna. Kanna is actually the name of Krishna, Lord Krishna, Kannan. And that's how I was called. So in my house, I was only known as Kanna. In fact, many people didn't know my name was Ignatius in my family. So if any of my school friends would come to to the house to meet on a weekend or to exchange notes, they'll stand there at the door and say, is Ignatius here? Ignatius. No, there's nobody here by that name, and they would send them. So afterwards, of course, I had to tell my friends, ask for Kanna. So that's how my name progressed. And then when I came to the US and I got my immigration, the immigration officer said, he saw the confusion in my name. He said, okay, tell me what is the name you want to be known by. If you put Swami as your last name, then your children, your wife would be going with that last name. If you put Ignatius as the last name, then they would be known as Ignatius last name. So I said I never grew up with my father. I hardly know him. And I don't want my wife or children to be known by his name, his first name. So I said I'll make my last name Ignatius and I'll go with Swami as my first name. And little did I realize at that time I could have changed my name, my first name to Iggy, because that is what went into my immigration name and later on passport, everything. But I was not given that option or not told. So I got a name called Swami Ignatius. Ignatius was the last name. So that's how it went, and then later on in one of the episodes I'll tell you how I finally, because nobody called me Swami, I was always known as Iggy. My name, official name Ignatius. So later on in the courts in the US, I changed my first name legally to Iggy. In fact, the judge sitting there was asking me, why are you changing your name? Are you trying to run away from credit? I said, Your Honor, can you say my first name? So he was struggling to say Swami. So as he was struggling, I said, see, that is why. That was really my father's name. So I am always known as Iggy. I wanted to change that because now I'm doing business and all that stuff. It will be much easier for everybody in the US to call me Ignatius. One other thing I was growing up was, I always grew up with my mother, my maternal grandmother, Salvos. My father used to live in Tirupur. And I was forced to go visit my father for a few days every year during my school days. And I actually hated it. I could not relate to my father. And those 4 or 5 days I went there was hell for me, but I was forced. And so that used to happen there. But then as a small kid, I used to go there, and with my half brothers, they used to take me hunting to the nearby forest or whatever woods. And later on, when I grew up and I kind of figured what my father had done or not done to me in my life, I had a sort of resentment. And after I could decide on my own, I stopped going and seeing my father. And after that, my father used to come to Chennai sometimes, and they would stay in one of the relatives' houses, and they would send word. Then I will go there and I will sit there, and he will want to talk to me. And with resentment, I used to go there 5-10 minutes. And that's all I had known about my father. So that's how I grew up. My school. In my school was St. Bede's Anglo-Indian High School, and it was one of the few English schools in the city. And a lot of the film stars' children used to study there. I remember my classmates were one poet, Kavinyar Kannadasan. One of his sons, Annadurai was his name. He was my best friend in the lower standards. Then Karthik, he was actor Muthuraman's son. He's a big hero. He became a very big hero. he was there in my class. Then Radha Ravi, M.R. Radha's son, he was also a big actor, more of a villain actor. Like that, many stars. Almost our school, and there was one more school called Don Bosco. These were the two schools, go-to schools for all the film stars' children. And most of these stars' parents, who are stars themselves, used to come to pick up their children from school at the end at 3:30 or something. And they would all come in their cars and park there on the side by the trees. And usually the last hour for us was PT, physical training. And so we used to go there, and I remember going to each of these actors, Muthuraman, Sirgadi Govindarajan, a singer, with a piece of paper, say, sir, we want your autograph. So that was that. And finally, when I graduated towards later on, we had very good friends. I had some 2-3 of them. In fact, one of the things that happened was I was so much into movies. So if there was any movie shooting going on in the beach, we were right on the beach in school. I would jump the wall and go there and watch the film shooting. And I wouldn't know of what time it was, because we didn't have watches those days. And then I would come back to school after one scene was, or so whatever was shot. And then of course the school had already started after lunch, and I would be late. The watchman wouldn't allow me, and then they would send me to the principal's office. And a lot of times I got punished. I had to go stand outside the class. Many a days I've done that. Then on one occasion, I was a speaker, an orator, and I was participating in one day in oration, and I won whatever I had won. And then the next day, some of my other friends who were also crazy about movies, they decided that one NGR's movie called Kudi Irunda Koyil, NGR's movie was released. They said, let's bunk classes. So after lunch, 3 of us, we were bunked the class and went for the movie. And came back, and I didn't know what happened. It was a Friday. So Monday morning, in our assembly, when I'm standing there, the father, I remember the father's name, brother John Peter, he called out. He says, this guy named them. I think it was Kenny, Joshua, and third was me. I don't know, he didn't want to say Ignatius, maybe because it was a Salesian school and Ignatius was the patron saint. And the other friend of theirs stay back after the assembly. And so after the assembly, we were taken into his room, and he wrote down, we used to have this calendar that we used to have. So he said, suspended from school until parents come and speak to us. Oh my God, I remember, we three went to, there was a tank called Kabaliswar temple tank. Every temple used to have a tank of water they would collect. It became the local pond. We were sitting on the side, and we said, how can we go home with this suspension? And we discussed many options. Like one of them was jumping into the pond, the lake, and dying. And the second thing was maybe we'll run away from the house, go to some other city, catch the train. And all 3 of us were crazy of movies. In fact, we used to keep discussing, oh my God, I just wish I finished this high school. And the day of my last exam, the next morning, the 3 of us go and stand in front of, I think it was Balachandra. He had a company called Himalaya or some company, film company. We go stand there and ask for a job. That was our master plan after our high school. So finally we all went home. Of course, nothing happened. And my mother came, and of course I got thrashed. I used to be thrashed a whole lot. I don't know why. So if I've done something wrong like this, then when my mom comes from the office, as she comes around the bend, I would start kneeling down. Because I know that was a punishment. So if she comes in and she sees me kneeling down, she knows either I didn't get my first rank in class, I had come down, or I had done something wrong. Of course, I had cried and begged forgiveness and this and that. And then, of course, she signed that suspension thing. And I went to school and I was allowed into school. So that is how my interest in movies had started. Of one of the students who was my friend, I told you this poet Kannadasan's son, Annadurai. He, he and I, we were preparing something for a function. We had to paste some flags, colored triangle flags in a string so that would be tight. And they used to give us some rice. We used to use the boiled rice, the boiled one, cooked one, as the paste to put it on those triangle colored papers, to put it on the string to hang it like not a flag, some decorative thing. And I remember he had run out of the rice he had, so he asked me, he says, Iggy, can you give me two grains of rice so that I can come? So what I did is from my rice, I took 2 grains of rice, gave it to him. He got mad at me. He says, when somebody says 2 grains of rice, they mean give me some. You don't just give exactly 2. And then of course I gave him. And of course I lost touch with all my friends. But this is how my childhood is. So in the next episodes, I will talk about my college days. And later on,